Hello, let me tell you a story about Trevor. I never believed in things like psychic visions, premonitions, or anything that seemed too out of reach of logic. I had been a psychiatric nurse for too long, working in the field for over a decade to put stock in any kind of mystical nonsense. My world was built on facts, on science, and the understanding of intricacies of the human mind. That was the way I operated. But then there was Trevor. Trevor was a patient like no other I'd ever encountered. He was in his early 30s, a quiet man that spent most of his time staring out the window of his room as he was searching for something just beyond the glass. He had been admitted due to severe anxiety and paranoia. For the first few days, he didn't speak much other than give short answers when the doctors would ask questions. He was one of those patients who seemed to keep to himself, withdrawn, keeping his thoughts locked away. His eyes were always dark, and there was restlessness to him that we couldn't quite understand. I was assigned to check on him regularly, and over the course of a few weeks, I began to develop a routine with Trevor. I'd walk into his room, check his vitals, ask him about his day. At first, he wouldn't say much beyond fine or okay. But gradually, he started to open up. There was one moment, though, that changed everything. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon, around 2 weeks into Trevor's stay, when he said something that made my blood run cold. It was just a simple remark at first, a passing comment, but the way he said it stuck with me. "You're going to have a fight with your wife next week," he told me. As a matter of fact, as I adjusted the IV in his arm, I glanced up, confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked, half laughing, thinking he was just making some odd offhand remark. "No," he said, his voice steady, his eyes focused. "You're going to have a big argument with her. It's going to be a fight, a bad one. It'll happen at dinner on Tuesday. She'll accuse you of not caring enough." I was stunned. It wasn't like we had been talking about my marriage. We haven't even spoken about my personal life at all. Trevor had not even once shown any interest in my home life. We weren't friends, at least not in the way you might think. We were just patient and nurse, nothing more. Yet there he was, predicting a fight with my wife like it was some fact he knew to be true. I didn't know how to respond to that. Was it just a coincidence? Could he have been reading me somehow? Maybe he had overheard a conversation I didn't remember having, or maybe he picked up on something in the way I was acting. But I brushed it off. What was the likelihood that some random patient in a psychiatric ward could predict something as specific as a future argument with my wife? The following week, I forgot about it. I got busy with work, with my patients, and the thought of Trevor's prediction slipped away. That is, until Tuesday evening came. It started off like any other evening, normal routine. But as we sat down for dinner, things quickly took a turn. My wife Sarah started talking about the same things she always did. Complaints about my lack of attention to the house, the bills piling up, and how I never seemed to really listen to her anymore. It wasn't anything new, but something in her voice was different that night. Her words were sharp-pointed, and they felt like daggers aimed straight at me. I could feel the tension building between us, the familiar pressure creeping up from the pit of my stomach. And then, without warning, the words came out. "You never care about what I need, do you?" she asked. Her voice trembled with frustration. I blinked, taken back. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to hold the line of patience, but it was hard. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm doing everything I can." But it wasn't enough. It never was. Her eyes flashed with anger. "You just don't care. You're focused on your job, your patients, that you don't even notice that I'm standing right here needing you." It felt like a punch to the gut. The words Trevor had spoken were echoing in my head, growing louder as Sarah's accusations grew more intense. We argued for what felt like hours. I could hear every word, but I couldn't understand what was happening. This wasn't just a regular fight. It was everything that had been building up, everything we had swept under the rug over the years coming to a head. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to hear these things, especially after everything we had been through together. But the words kept coming, one after the other, like they had to be said. Like this was the only way to be heard. It wasn't until much later, after the storm had passed, and we both sat in silence, that I realized what had happened. The argument Trevor had predicted, the fight that was so specific in its details, the accusation of not caring enough, had come to pass. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It didn't make sense. How could he have known? How could Trevor, a man who didn't know anything about my relationship, predict a fight so accurately, down to the exact words that were said? The next day, I went to work with one thing on my mind: Trevor. I walked into his room, my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I needed answers. I found him sitting by the window again, staring out like he always did. But this time, he turned to look at me as I entered. His eyes were calm, unbothered, like he had known I'd come. Trevor, I said slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. How did you know that? How did you know I would have that fight with Sarah? He didn't seem surprised by my question. He just looked at me, his gaze steady, almost knowing. And then, in a voice that had no fear or hesitation, he said, "She told me in her sleep." My heart skipped a beat. What? She talks to me in her sleep, Trevor continued, his voice as calm as ever. She's been doing it for weeks. She talks about you, about your marriage, about things she never said aloud. She's been having dreams, but it's not just dreams. It's like a message. I can hear everything she says. I didn't know how to respond to that. It didn't make sense. How could Sarah have been talking in her sleep about our marriage to Trevor? How could he know these things without ever meeting her, without ever being involved in any of our private conversations? But there was no denying it. Trevor was right. The argument, the words we exchanged were too specific, too accurate to be just a coincidence. Somehow, Trevor had known, and he wasn't the only one who had heard these things. I left Trevor's room that day with more questions than answers. What did this mean? Was it possible that my wife's subconscious mind was reaching out to someone, sharing her deepest frustrations with someone she'd never met? Or was there something else at play here? Something beyond my understanding? I still don't have the answers, but every time I look at my wife now, I wonder if there's more to our relationship than I realized. If somehow the things we keep hidden, our fears, our doubts, are being whispered in places we can't see. And if the ones we least expect, like Trevor, are the ones who can hear it all. Thank you.